Chapter 386. Curse. I will definitely make you scream and wail for 7 days and 7 nights before you die, and once I suck all your blood and essence, I will turn you into a dried corpse. With a leap, Madame G charged toward Su Ming. The instant she got closer, all the expressions on the familiar figures around Su Ming twisted, and all of them swiftly charged towards him from all directions. At the same time, that 5-colored fog in the air started churning and swept towards Su Ming from all directions. Madame G was the quickest of all to arrive. When she was less than 5 feet away from him, she lifted her right hand and a black fork appeared on her palm. Then, right when she was about to stab that fork into the center of Su Ming's brows, the murky look in Su Ming's eyes was replaced by a hint of mockery, and along with it, a pair of clear eyes. At that moment, there was not a hint of lust on his face. All of that which happened before was an intentional act, and there was only one purpose, for I wanted to draw Madame G closer, then kill her in one move. Madame G had a lot of tricks up her sleeve, and Su Ming was worried that she might still have other moves left. That was why he used himself as bait to lure her in. The moment she saw the mocking look in Su Ming's eyes, Madame G's expression drastically changed. Her heart let out a loud thump. She wanted to retreat, but it was already too late. Su Ming took a swift step forward, and he was so quick that he arrived before her in the blink of an eye. He lifted his left hand and grabbed Madame G's right hand, which held the fork, and at the same time, he rammed his body straight into her chest. Madame G shuddered and cracking sounds came from her body. She fell back and blood flowed out of her lips. Dismay and shock appeared on her face, along with a hint of terror. However, before she could retreat a little further away, Su Ming had already activated that terrifying speed of his and caught up to her once again. With one sweep of his leg, he kicked Madame G's head. Bang! Madame G coughed out a huge mouthful of blood. Her head had snapped to the side and her body was flung out. However, Su Ming frowned. He did not notice any aura of death from the woman's body. Instead, her life force had become even more exuberant. He let out a cold harumph. Su Ming did not stop. He took a step forward and caught up to her once again, then lifted his right hand and curled it into a fist in midair. Immediately, bolts of lightning started swimming in the sky. The instant he unfurled his right hand, bolts of lightning swiftly gathered together to turn into balls of lightning. Thunder rumbled, and the balls of lightning let out a piercing lightning in Su Ming's hand. Then he pushed them all into the center of Madame G's brows. A loud bang rang in the sky, and Madame G let out a shrill scream of pain. However, Su Ming's attack had not ended. With one move, he once again closed in on her and lifted his left hand. Immediately, a whirlwind swiftly formed in the air, and once it closed in on Madame G, it started spinning rapidly, causing blood and flesh to fly all over in the air. Madame G was repeatedly injured during her retreat. She wanted to resist, but when Su Ming closed in on her, he made a hand seal with his right hand and pointed at the sky. Immediately, the distant Han Mountain bell suddenly let out a bell chime that stunned the heart and soul. The bell chime came too suddenly. When it fell into Madame G's ears, it made the woman's movements as she tried to resist slow down. The instant her mind and soul shuddered, green light shone before Su Ming, and the small virescent sword shot out with a flash. Under the control of Su Ming's divine sense, it charged towards Madame G's head. In that instant, a large amount of blood sprayed into the air. As the small sword swept by, a head flew up. It was night, and the full moon hung high in the sky. At that moment, that head flew up with blood scattering all around it. However, Su Ming did not relax even when Madame G's head flew into the sky. Instead, when her head shot up, the life-threatening sensation became much stronger. The instant his pupils shrank, he saw Madame G, who had already lost her head, lift up her right hand to grab the head that had been separated from her body. Madness and hatred appeared in her eyes, and as she stared at Su Ming, she let out a piercing screech. That screech turned into a wave of sound that stirred up ripples in the air. The strength of that wave of sound was like a needle that stabbed into Su Ming's ears, making his ears ring. He immediately moved back, and at the same time, he drew several circles before him with his right hand. With each circle he drew, the power of the wave of sound would be reduced. Each of those circles was a whirlwind, and after drawing several of those circles and having retreated about 300 feet, blood flowed out of his ears. Could it be that all soul catchers have refined their bodies until they're all undying? Su Ming's mood went sour. Madame Ji not being dead was not surprising to him. Her current state was the same as the young soul catcher he had met in the past. Spirit plunder had amazing effects when used against these undyings, but the power of this Madame Ji was different from that young soul catcher. It was as if she did not just practice the cultivation method of a soul catcher alone. As Su Ming moved back, he lifted his right hand and seized the air in the direction of the mountain range behind him. Immediately, from his cave abode in the mountain range, the 3 spirit plunders floating above the old berserker's head to freeze him in place turned into 3 long arcs that shone with a dark light and shot out of the cave abode to charge towards Su Ming's right hand. Yet the moment he summoned them, Madame Ji had already grabbed her head and placed it back on her neck. Her blood and flesh quickly grew back in place, and in the blink of an eye, her head had fused back with her neck. At the same time, she lifted her right hand, and in her palm was a drop of fresh blood. That blood did not belong to her, but to Su Ming. This was a drop of blood she had obtained secretly when he coughed out his blood previously. She was holding that drop of blood with a dead grip in her fist at that moment and did not bother with the 3 pearls that were rapidly charging towards Su Ming, giving her a sense of pressure. She narrowed her eyes into slits. The shaman's lord of 9 li, after the 9th morning since the day you were born, the power of your companion that which you have abandoned has turned into the desolate shadows in the world and fused into the path of life for all the living, and hence, all those with souls must live and die. If they exist, there will come a day when they will disappear, and if they are blessed, there will come a day when they are cursed. I offer my blood and life to the desolate shadows of the world, and with this person's blood as the lure, rob him of his blood and life. Curse! Madame Ji's body started rapidly withering away, and in the blink of an eye, she looked as if she had turned into a dried-up corpse. She also aged. Her beautiful face became ashen, and her lascivious body turned ugly. A bang came from her right hand, and that drop of Su Ming's blood exploded, turning into blood mist that entered Madame Ji's eyes, nose, ears, and mouth as she inhaled. Killing intent appeared in Madame Ji's eyes. Curse was the strongest spell for soul catchers. In fact, this spell did not come from the candle dragon. Instead, through the research of generations of soul catchers, they had come up with this powerful killing move along with those walking down the path of spirit mediums and thought soothsayers using some unique methods. There were even rumors that said that this spell was not created by shamans but was left behind on some items from ages back in the form of pictures. It only gradually turned into this spell after some people started examining them. This spell could be casted by spirit mediums and thought soothsayers, but the spell's power when casted by soul catchers was the strangest and most unpredictable. However, it was not something that everyone could cast either. The spell's chants were the most classified secret among the shamans, and the records of that chant were only kept in big tribes, and most of them were incomplete. The complete chant only existed in the god of shamans' temple. Not even Ji Yun Hai could obtain the complete chant with his status. He could only get the incomplete chant. However, he had come across an ancient artifact that had been left behind since ages past by chance, and with his genius, he had discovered how to cast the curse through much trial and error. Yet by doing so, he had also brought disaster upon himself. Madame Ji's curse came from her husband, Ji Yun Hai. However, with her potential, she could only master the basics, and she could only make offerings to the ancestor of the shaman tribe, the soul of 9 li. If it had been Ji Yun Han, then he would have been able to make an offering to a powerful existence that existed before the shaman and berserker tribes in exchange for a terrifying power. The instant Madame Ji sucked in the blood mist, Su Ming started trembling. A gigantic vortex of blood suddenly appeared in the air above his head. That vortex appeared too suddenly, and the instant it manifested, it started rapidly turning. As it turned, Su Ming instantly discovered that his body had been frozen in place and he could only move in an area of 10 feet. He could not leave it. White mist started spreading from his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, and that mist was rapidly sucked away by that vortex. His body started withering away slowly and a greyish hue appeared at the roots of his hair. His blood, his life force, his everything were being sucked away incessantly by that vortex. That was not all. Su Ming also discovered that his organs were beginning to fail him, as if they were rotting away. Even his breath had the smell of decay. Madame Ji's face was dark where she stood outside the vortex. Casting that spell had also put a huge burden on her. But she had already made up her mind. Once she killed Su Ming, she would definitely go back to Black Crane Tribe and eradicate it. Enjoy the feeling of death as it comes to you. Look at your flesh withering away. Watch your life seeping out of your body. See yourself turning into a corpse. This is the result of you offending me. Madame G's face was filled with malice. Her voice was shrill, her face was ugly, and she was so dried up and thin, she looked like a skeleton. Noisy. A chilling glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. Even if his actions were restricted and he could only move in an area of 10 feet, he was not afraid. He had a move that could allow him to leave. In truth, he only needed to use the power of the god of berserkers once and he could walk out of that place. However, he did not do that. The power of curse had incited a great deal of interest for Su Ming. He lifted his head and stared at the vortex with sparkling eyes as his life force and blood were drained from his body. He completely ignored Madame G and sat down in that area to examine that vortex. When she saw Su Ming's conceited actions, Madame G's lips curled up into a cold sneer, and her heart burned with an even stronger anger. Time passed by, and 7 breaths later, Su Ming's body had already dried up, but his eyes were still sparkling. He seemed to have discovered something from the vortex, but there were many things that remained unclear to him. The moon was hanging high in the sky at that moment. With a glint in his eyes, Su Ming lifted his right index finger, placed it by his mouth, bit through it, and swiped his finger across his left eye, then smeared his blood on his right eye as well. Burning of blood. With the power of burning of blood, he could obtain life force and use it to gain more time to allow himself to examine this vortex. Su Ming had formed a very great interest towards this strange spell. This was not the first time he had heard of curse. In truth, he'd heard of this mysterious spell among the shaman tribe from Wu Duo. Very few people had control over this spell, so now, this was the first time he saw it, and there was no way he would give up on a chance like this. There was a graceful-looking, long-haired man dressed in a white robe that looked somewhat similar to Su Ming in the daily small-scale battle between the shamans and berserkers outside Sky Mist City. Almost the instant Su Ming began the burning of his blood, that man took a shaman's life with a cruel smile on his lips. Big brother Yu Feng, your rank should reach the top 60 this time once we return to the city after the battle. There were some berserkers beside the man, and these were the words spoken by one of them with a smile as they continued fighting. I'm not thinking about that. The ranking is not important to me. What I care about is this war for us, berserkers. Yu Feng shook his head, and there was a hint of worry on his face. His words and his expression immediately caused the people around him to grow respectful of him. Yet at that moment, Yu Feng suddenly shuddered, and for a moment, a hint that something bad was going to happen, along with a sense of danger, appeared in his heart. He was just about to examine his surroundings when his expression drastically changed. He coughed out a large mouthful of blood and his face aged by 10 years in an instant. Su Ming. It's Su Ming. His casting an art. Disbelief appeared in Yu Feng's eyes as he screamed madly in his heart. Chapter 387. Assumptions towards the curse. This Yu Feng was naturally He Feng, who had hidden away when Su Ming left the battlefield outside Sky Mist City. This person had swallowed a berserker and turned into him, and his days in Sky Mist City had been rather fruitful over these days. His ambitions had also become increasingly savage. In fact, he had even made the decision that once his power had grown stronger, he would devour Su Ming and turn into him to travel through the land. The reason for his ambitions was because he had obtained a sliver of memory regarding a particular inheritance when he was fusing with the wings of the moon. He did not tell Su Ming about this and had been training in secret. These days, besides gaining battle achievements in the battlefield, he had used up all his other time to seal away the wings of the moon in his body. It caused Su Ming to be unable to use these creatures anymore because He Feng had turned them into one with him. He was certain that he had sealed up most of them through the legacy he had gained in his memories, and his confidence had grown even more. However, he would never have expected that such a large amount of his life force would start draining away so suddenly in the battlefield. The loss of his life force shocked He Feng and also horrified him. He did not even need to think about it too deeply and could instantly guess that this was Su Ming casting his art. Damn it! I've already sealed up the wings of the moon in me, so how did Su Ming manage to cast his art? With a pale face, He Feng stumbled and staggered a few steps back on the battlefield. His companions went to him and protected him with surprise on their faces. At the same time, they also asked about his condition. It's nothing. I injured my body yesterday night when I was training. I originally decided to heal myself today, but when I remembered that we have to fight, I forced down the injuries, and what happened just now was my injuries acting up. Thank you for your concern. I hope you will all help protect me for a moment, just until I force down my injuries once again. He Feng said in a low voice and wrapped his fist in his palm to bow towards the crowd. After the people around him nodded their heads, he sat down without a hint of hesitation and tapped a few spots on his body with both his hands. Yet at that very moment, He Feng's expression changed drastically once again. His face started withering away in that strange manner once more, and sharp pain traveled through his entire body and soul, causing He Feng to be unable to help himself but let out a cry of pain. His cheeks sank and his body started drying up rapidly. In the blink of an eye, he looked as if he had turned into a dried-up corpse. That strange change made all the berserkers around him terrified. Horror appeared in He Feng's eyes. He could clearly feel his life force and essence draining away from his body, forcefully absorbed by some power from above, but when he lifted his head to look up, he saw that the sky above him was calm. In fact, the draining of his blood, his essence, and his life force had nothing to do with the wings of the moon. It was absolutely useless whether he had chosen to seal them or not. It must be Su Ming. What is he? Just how did he do it? Terror filled He Feng's heart. He had come to a sudden realization that even if Su Ming had left him, and even if he had escaped from his eyes, if Su Ming wanted to punish him, he could do so from wherever he was, and it horrified him. However, what He Feng did not expect was that Su Ming was not even casting an art on him. In fact, he could not even be considered to have cast an art. At that moment, Su Ming's eyes were shining brightly as he stared at the vortex in the sky above him. As it turned each time, Su Ming's expression would occasionally be filled with astonishment, then with delight, but it would also turn into confusion soon, and eventually, he became subject to ever-changing moods. Madame Ji was only skin and bones, her appearance ugly. She stared at Su Ming not too far in the distance with scorn and malice in her eyes. She had naturally seen his actions, but she did not believe that he would be able to find any clues about her curse. Yet even so, Madame Ji had also become doubtful once she saw how long Su Ming persevered under her curse. While he had become thin in her eyes, he still had a long way to go before he became a dried-up corpse. It was as if ever since he performed the burning of blood and the moon in the sky shone with that strangely alluring red, the great power of the curse had shifted from him. It was as if there was some other, seriously unfortunate, person who was suffering in his stead. Su Ming had not even thought about letting He Feng take his place. He had originally cast the burning of blood with the intention of slowing the draining of his life force and blood. However, he did not expect that once he cast that art, he would sense a power belonging to a fire berserker in the direction of the land of the berserkers. The instant he sensed that power, the force of the curse gathered on Su Ming's body was mysteriously shifted away, falling onto He Feng through Su Ming, as if he was a medium. I am the lord of the fire berserkers, that is why when I cast the burning of blood, the strange power of the curse will be sent to my people to bear. Once they are unable to withstand it any longer, only then will I continue suffering through it. Now, the only fire berserker besides me in this world, is the fire berserker I created, He Feng. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he gained more understanding towards the power of the curse. He looked at the vortex in the sky. His eyes sparkled, and he felt as if he had gained a vague sort of epiphany. However, this epiphany was insignificant for him to master curse. Curse? What if curses fall on those that come from the same source? He Feng is the fire berserker I created, that is why he can be said to be from the same source as me. Which is why he is within the area of effect of the curse. But besides affecting those related through one source, does the curse also affect those related by blood? Uncertainty appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He remembered that Wu Juo did not mention the power of cursing those who came from the same source when he talked about the mysterious curse in the land of the shamans. He mentioned instead that it seemed to affect those related by blood, and had even said that there was once a shaman who was cursed by a powerful soul catcher, and all those related to him by blood in his tribe, even if barely, died. Eventually, as most of the people in the tribe were connected by blood, more than half of the people died. If what Wu Duo said is true and curse will really affect those connected by blood, then the power of that spell shouldn't be that great, or else, should there be powerful shamans in the shaman tribe, they could just curse the entire berserker tribe, and let them all die, or they could also let the berserkers be forever unable to break through a certain realm. Su Ming widened his eyes. This was some of the assumptions he had made after he saw the power of the curse. However, the answers he had obtained through these assumptions stunned him. Ever since the third god of berserkers died, all my tribesmen have only been able to reach the berserker soul realm, and it was difficult for them to break through that state. They said that only when the fourth god of berserkers appears would the entire berserker tribe be able to continue forth past the berserker soul realm. Could this be? Perhaps I'm thinking too much. Su Ming's breathing quickened, and he only managed to calm it down after a long moment had passed. Right when Su Ming was stunned by his own thoughts and obtained that epiphany, Heifeng's shrill screams of pain echoed through the battlefield outside Sky Mist City. His body had already withered away until he no longer looked like a human, and a large amount of decaying spots also appeared on his body. They let out a rotten stench, causing shock to appear on the faces of the people around him. Heifeng could clearly feel his blood and essence scattering away rapidly, and his life force was also draining away swiftly from his body. His mind had become muddled, and the feeling of death loomed over his heart and soul once again, turning into a strong sense of fear. Master, I was wrong. I really did wrong this time. Heifeng's screams were fixed with pleads for mercy. Once his companions heard those words, especially of him calling out to his master, they were all momentarily stunned. Right then, Heifeng suddenly shook violently and turned into a puddle of blood. Even his blood had also melted away, but since he had obtained that body by devouring it, even if it had disappeared, Heifeng's soul was still around and was floating as a ball of black shadow. With a flash, that black shadow appeared beside a berserker, then opened its mouth wide to swallow the young man. Before anyone could react to it, the young man let out a pained scream and his entire body was swallowed up by that black shadow. Big brother Heifeng, you. He's not Heifeng. He's the shaman who killed Heifeng. Kill him. All the berserkers gathered around swiftly attacked, but when their divine abilities closed in on the young man enveloped by Heifeng, the black shadow disappeared and the young man's face was revealed. It was a face that had withered away. In the land of the shamans, the vortex in the sky beyond Su Ming's cave abode in the mountain range had started dissipating, as if it was very difficult for it to maintain its form. Madame Ji was so stunned that her mouth was hanging open in shock. With a blank look, she stared at Su Ming, who had only become slightly thinner, almost unable to believe her own eyes. She knew well of the strength of the curse. Even a latter shaman who fell under it accidentally would lose a large amount of their life force if he or she did not end up dead. However, Su Ming was practically unharmed right before her eyes. The drainage of his life force could also be considered insignificant. This strange sight made Madame Ji suck in a sharp breath. Her face instantly turned pale, but she did not retreat. Instead, madness appeared in her eyes. She knew that the curse would exist for the span of 10 more breaths, and after those 10 breaths, it would disappear. Then, this Su Ming would be able to get out of that restricted area of 10 feet. I don't believe that I can't kill you today. Once I kill you, I'll turn you into a puppet, and you will turn into my defender along with Ji Yunhai. With your divine abilities and your strange skills, you must also be quite well known in the shaman tribe. But today, you must die. The killing intent in Madame Ji's eyes became stronger. She took a few steps backwards and spread her arms wide open before sucking in a deep breath. With that one breath, a huge gust of wind charged towards Madame Ji, and when it entered her mouth, a tattoo suddenly appeared on her ugly face. That tattoo was a hideous-looking head, and the size of the head was definitely not of an adult's, but an infant's. The span of 10 breaths slowly trickled by. Su Ming eventually stopped examining that curse. The previous research had allowed a slight epiphany, but if he wanted to gain the true curse, he would need to figure out a way to get it from Madame Ji. A stern look appeared on his face. This Madame Ji might not be a latter shaman, but she was one of the extremely powerful medial shamans Su Ming had ever encountered before. Her methods were also numerous and varied. Yet the more that was the case, the more Su Ming dispelled the thought of immediately using the power of the god of berserkers and all his other killing moves. He did not have a lot of experience in fighting against shamans. Large-scale battles could not be counted in that number. This sort of battle where two people tried to kill each other with arts and spells was something Su Ming lacked experience in. Now that he ran into someone who was skilled in this and had a large variety of spells, he did not want to give up on such an opportunity. Chapter 388. You say I'm malicious? Madame G's expression was fierce, causing the tattoo on her face to become increasingly more frightening. That infant's appearance and the dark look in its eyes caused it to seem like Madame G had 4 eyes staring at Su Ming. She lifted her hands and moved her fingers in a strange manner. Very soon, distorted ripples appeared before her. As those ripples spread out, Madame G let out a piercing screech. Ghost Impregnation Shaman Tribe has always offered living spirits as sacrifices since past generations. As the only ghost wife, I offer my body to summon my tribe's sacred spirit. Madame G's shrill voice was piercing to the ears and sounded like bones grating against each other, and layers of echoes stirred up all around them. The instant she said those words, Su Ming's pupils shrank. He clearly saw Madame G's sunken belly on her dried-up body start wiggling, as if there was something in it that was crawling about as if it was in a hole, and it was also swelling up rapidly. At that moment, Madame G seemed to have turned into a pregnant woman. She was continuously sucking in a large amount of wind and her belly swelled up even further. Eventually, she looked as if she had been carrying for 10 months. However, when compared to the withered state in the other parts of her body, her swelled-up belly made her look terrifying. Veins popped up on Madame G's swollen stomach, and on her belly were bumps that were about the size of a fist each. All of them started popping up all over her belly, and shrill laughter came out of Madame G's mouth. She stared at Su Ming with eyes that burned murderously. My husband, Ji Yunhai, was sealed by your hands. My soul catcher's allure was useless towards you. My curse was ineffective as well. Ever since I married Ji Yunhai, I have never been injured. Since I can't kill you, then I will let my baby. I will let my tribe's sacred spirit, ghost child, kill you. Madame G's belly became bigger, and a strange tone seeped into her laughter. She pressed her left hand to her swollen belly and seized the air with her right hand. Immediately, a toy drum appeared in her hands, and once she let go, that drum floated by her side. The vortex in the sky above Su Ming dissipated, and the restriction placed upon him was also rapidly weakening. He stared at Madame G and spoke slowly. You malicious woman. Not only did you kill your own husband, you're also using your own child to cast a spell. Malicious. Madame G laughed loudly, and the hatred in her laughter was incredibly strong. She looked at Su Ming and said shrilly, I'm malicious? That's only because you haven't seen a truly malicious person. Ghost Impregnation Tribe might be mysterious, but we've always set ourselves apart from the world. But now, I am the only one remaining of my tribe. All my other tribe members are dead, and they were all murdered by Ji Yunhai when he used them to experiment with his curse in the past. From the elderly folk who did not have a hint of shamanic power in them to newborn infants. Have you ever seen the elderly clawing through their chests and tearing out their hearts to eat them just so they could be released from suffering? Have you ever seen newborn infants crying in pain while they rot away and die? Have you ever seen the pain of all the men in a tribe having their bones grow out of their flesh? Have you ever seen all the women in the tribe being forced to watch their own family suffering this way but being unable to control their own lust? To only laugh foolishly, coquettishly, and pounce on the enemy of your tribe, who made all your tribe members suffer so terribly, while crying and spreading your legs, and thrusting your hips lustfully. You haven't seen any of these before, so what right do you have to say I am malicious? Madame G shouted shrilly. Agitation and hatred appeared on her face, along with grief and agony. She lifted her right hand and seized at the air once again, and this time, what appeared in her hand was a toy bow, which floated beside the drum. I'm malicious. I'm indeed malicious, but all my malice is due to Ji Yunhai. It's all because of him. He killed all my tribe members just so he could experiment with his curse. At that time, I cried while moving my body against him. I hate him, I hate myself. I begged the heavens for help, I begged all the gods and spirits for help. As long as someone helped me, I could sacrifice everything. But no one helped me. The gods and spirits closed their eyes and coldly walked away. Dark clouds appeared in the sky and used rain to wash away all traces of what happened. When that nightmare was over, all the men in the tribe were dead, and I saw among them my husband, my father, my mother, and my newborn daughter. Can you understand that sort of pain? But that nightmare didn't end at that point. Xianxia used a spell on all the women in the tribe so that they would show signs of pregnancy. He didn't just want to use my tribe to test his newly refined curse, he also took an interest towards the sacred spirit of my tribe, the sacred spirit of ghost impregnation tribe that we have been offering sacrifices to for several generations, the ghost child. He wanted to use a diabolical method and force all the women to give birth to the ghost child so that he could use it to bear the power of his curse and make his curse even stronger. Madame G had never said these things to anyone before and had hidden them in her heart for many years. At that moment, she was fighting to try to kill Su Ming and was forced to this extent. Because of this, in her bout of madness, due to Su Ming calling her malicious, she poured out all the words in her heart to him. Everyone died. My elder sister, my mother, all of my sisters in the tribe had their stomachs cut open by Xianxia, and because they weren't pregnant with the ghost child, they died. Why do you think I'm alive? It's because I was successfully pregnant with the ghost child. A long time is needed to carry the ghost child, that is why I didn't die. I was taken away by Xianxia. He wanted to wait for the birth of the ghost child. I turned into his toy. The reason why I am so lewd is because the curses he planted in me have increased over the years. I became the specimen for his curse. Am I then considered among the malicious people in the world? I was pure in the past. I believed that the sky would forever be blue. I believed the dark clouds would only last for a moment. But the truth is, the blue in the sky is also a form of oppression. That's why I thought of everything I could to please Xianxia, and eventually, after using every method I had in my disposal, I finally found his weakness. After a full 60 years, when the ghost child was born, I killed him. I turned him into a puppet, but the price was that my ghost child dissipated. There's only a hint left in my body, and it turned into a spell I did not want to use. I originally thought everything would end at the moment of his death. I originally thought I would be free and could search for a new life. I would settle in a remote corner and live out the remainder of my days. But do you know what? You know? I got used to this sort of lifestyle. I'm already used to the pleasures of lust. I've changed. I'm no longer me. I'm no longer my past self. Tears fell out of Madame G's eyes. As she screamed at Su Ming, she lifted her right hand, and this time, a baby's skull appeared in her palm. That skull was blood red, and it floated beside the small drum along with the toy bow and arrow. Madame G's words fell into Su Ming's ears. The restrictions placed on his body had completely disappeared, but a look of conflict appeared on his face. From Madame G's expressions and her voice, he could tell that what she said was very likely to have transpired. Vaguely, he seemed to be able to see a pure, innocent figure that had disappeared in the passages of time standing behind Madame G. It wasn't anyone else who made this scar on my face, I did it. Every single time I couldn't control myself, I would tear it open and ruin my own face so that it won't heal, but it's useless, it's useless. I can't control my own body. All of this is because of Xianxia. Madame G looked as if she had lost her mind. At that moment, with that huge belly of hers and eyes filled with hatred, she glared at Su Ming. I'll kill you, then absorb your flesh and essence to make you bear my suffering. Ghost child, my baby, be born. Choose your path. If you choose to help Mama, then, kill him. Madame G's shrill voice suddenly became gentle. She stroked her belly, and the instant pain appeared on her face. Wisps of black mist suddenly spread from her stomach. As the black mist appeared, Madame G's belly started sinking rapidly. In the blink of an eye, an infant's cry rang out, and right before Su Ming's eyes, that vast amount of black mist gathered together and turned into a black infant in front of Madame G. There was a black horn on the infant's head and golden patterns on his face. Right then, it opened its mouth, revealing sharp teeth, then crawled towards the spot with the small drum, the bow and arrow, and the infant skull. A ghastly chill immediately enveloped the area when the ghost child appeared. However, it was clear that this ghost child was incomplete. Its body was rapidly dissipating, and the chill was also swiftly disappearing, allowing the normal temperature to return. It was just as Madame G said. This ghost child was just the shadow left behind after it dissipated in the past. Xu Ming sighed and took a step forward to charge towards Madame G. He lifted his right hand, and a faint light shone. Then right when a vast amount of power spread from Xu Ming's body, the ghost child took one swift leap forward and appeared beside the baby's skull. Then once it grabbed the skull, it opened its mouth and bit down on it. Crunching sounds reverberated through the air, and he crushed the baby's skull with his bite. When he swallowed the skull, he lifted his head, and with eyes shining darkly when he looked towards Xu Ming, he charged out. "Kill him!" As Madame G screamed shrilly, the ghost child had already closed in on Xu Ming. Booming sounds reverberated in the air, and Xu Ming was forced back. Blood trickled out of the corners of his mouth. The ghost child was invisible. All of Xu Ming's attacks felt as if he had just attacked air. However, that was not all. The force that hit the air had appeared on his own body with a method Xu Ming could not understand. He had never seen such a strange spell before. As he retreated, a glint appeared in his eyes. It was not as if he did not have any killing moves for invisible objects. He lifted his right hand swiftly, then drew one line towards the ghost child. One line: Berserker Obliteration. This was the first style Xu Ming had created himself. It was also the strongest art among all the divine abilities he possessed. Right now, as he had arrived at the middle stage of the bone sacrifice realm, the power of the 4 berserker bones in his body was activated for the first time. The instant that stroke was finished, an ancient voice reverberated in the air, and it belonged to Xu Ming's very own god of berserkers' song. That voice spread out, filled with a majestic might. As Xu Ming drew that one line, the ghost child let out a shrill scream of pain. If he had been in his peak condition, he might have been fine, but he was now a manifestation of a hint of what remained of him in the past. He was dissipating quickly enough to begin with, and now, he'd run into Xu Ming's berserker obliteration, which could cut through space itself. That one line fell on his body. It was also at that moment when the stroke fell down that Xu Ming's identity was revealed, for the god of berserkers' song reverberated in the air and his clothes were torn apart due to the powerful force emanating from within his body, revealing his berserker mark. You're a berserker." Due to the injuries sustained by her ghost child, Madame G coughed out a huge mouthful of blood and her expression changed drastically. Chapter 389: The Death of Madame G. The ghost child fell back and his body started rapidly disappearing while crying out shrilly. When he returned to Madame G's side, there was only a small part of him left. Just as he was about to completely disappear, he looked towards Madame G, the murderous look in his eyes gone, replaced by a dependence and a reluctance to part. As a complicated look surfaced on Madame G's face, the ghost child went towards the floating small drum and grabbed it, then gave Madame G a smile that belonged only to babies, and with the smile on his face, his body gradually disappeared. "Ashes to ashes. My baby, you also left me." Madame G was momentarily stunned, then lifted her head to look at Xu Ming walking over from the distance. There was no longer hatred in her eyes, only a cold desire for death. "You're very strong. If you can continue becoming stronger, then I will give you a valuable treasure. This treasure is the source of Ji Yun Hai's curse, a spell that came from an age where there were no berserkers or shamans. It was because he obtained this item that he managed to learn the curse." As Madame G spoke, she lifted her right hand and pressed it on the fist-sized scar beneath her right breast. The instant she pressed on it, all 5 of her right hand's fingers pierced through her flesh and sank into her body. She staggered a few steps backwards, and when she took out her right hand, a rib appeared in her hand. That rib belonged to her. There was a red ring fixed on it. Madame G crushed that rib and started forming hand seals with her left hand as words that were difficult to understand fell from her lips. Once she did so and the rib was crushed, the red ring instantly floated in the sky, and with a red flash and a buzz, it disappeared. Xu Ming's expression changed. His divine sense was still spread around the area, and during that instant just now, he could vaguely feel that the ring had not disappeared but had instead expanded by several times its size. The spot where he and Madame G were at this moment was within that enlarged ring. Su Ming did not even have time to think. A buzzing sound appeared by his ears, and soon after, he saw a red line in the horizon in the distance. In an instant, the world in his eyes had turned blood red. If anyone looked from high up in the sky downwards at that moment, they would see that there was a circular red line that was shrinking from several tens of thousands of feet around Su Ming, and the speed at which it shrank was so fast that it was indescribable. Su Ming did not even have time to dodge. In fact, he did not even have time to execute any of his killing moves. He did not even have time to lift his hand, and the red line that was shrinking around him had already arrived 100 feet away from him. That red line was the ring. Once that ring was enlarged and surrounded Su Ming, it started swiftly shrinking. It did not come with a great momentum, but the sense of danger it brought him was rare. Once it shrank down completely, his body would definitely be unable to withstand it and he would shatter, not just his body but his soul as well. It was too quick. Before he even had time to resist, the red line had already closed in on him, and with a bang, Su Ming's body crumbled and blood mist scattered into the air. What remained in midair was that small red ring that floated there, unmoving. The fire ape was gone. When Su Ming and Madame G were fighting, it had left the place. As for the strange rod snake, it had hidden itself on the ground obediently, under Su Ming's orders from a long time ago, and was staring at Madame G coldly. Madame G looked at the spot where Su Ming had disappeared before her, then looked at the floating ring, and her entire being relaxed. A shrill laughter escaped through her lips, and the malice in her laughter was as thick as ever. Ji Yun Hai was sealed by your hands. My soul catcher's spell was useless towards you. My curse could not kill you. Even if the ghost child attacked you, you still had ways to fight against it, but now, you still died. You aren't the first powerful warrior I've killed using this ring, and you won't be last. A berserker. I didn't expect that you would be a berserker. But it doesn't matter, your body has already been crushed by the ring. Under that powerful force, even your soul has scattered into nothingness. Madame G's breathing quickened, and her laughter grew even more wanton. This might not be her last move, but it was one of the killing moves she would definitely not use easily. She could only control that ring once and with great difficulty. Every time she used it, her head would feel as if it was going to be ripped apart and she would lose all her senses. She would need about half a month before she could return to normal. She lifted her right hand, and the ring flew to her while wobbling in the air. Once she held it in her hands, she turned around to leave. She had already made her decision. When she had fully recovered, she would go massacre Black Crane tribe. Yet the moment she turned around, dark light suddenly shone at the spot where the ring floated once it shrank down, and Su Ming swiftly materialized in the air. His entire body was drenched in blood, and the mask on his face was no longer there. Blood trickled down the corners of his lips, and his right leg was no longer nimble. The moment he appeared, he charged towards Madame G with a speed as quick as lightning. During that moment just now, Su Ming did not have any time to execute any killing moves, but he had already learned how to constantly keep the stone fragment's dimension open when he was being hunted down by that old berserker. That was how he dodged that calamity in this battle. However, the ring's speed was simply too quick. Even if Su Ming had managed to escape into the stone's dimension, he had still been injured. Impossible! Madame G's expression changed drastically and disbelief appeared on her face. She was just about to retreat, but Su Ming was closing in on her quickly. As green light shone, Madame G let out a shrill cry and her head flew up. Her arms were also cut off from her body. Her legs exploded at the same time, and the instant they turned into blood mist, Su Ming's sword swept past her body and she was cut into 4 pieces. All of this happened in an instant. When Su Ming reappeared, he was already far in the distance and was panting harshly, but he did not relax his guard. Instead, the moment Madame G's body was cut into pieces, he lifted his right hand and started making hand seals before pointing towards Han Mountain Bell in the distance. He had already decided not to continue getting entangled with this woman. This Madame G had too many killing moves and they were dangerous and varied, causing Su Ming to fear her, especially just now, when he was practically at death's door. He no longer hesitated and activated the power of materialization he'd received after awakening the 5th head on Han Mountain Bell. Even if a large amount of his power would be absorbed, Madame G's large variety of attacks should also have reached its end. The chances of killing her at this moment with this skill compared to him activating this skill previously had become much higher. Right when Su Ming made those hand seals, a shrill screech came from Madame G's shredded body. Her exploded legs recovered in an instant and her torn arms swiftly returned to her. In the blink of an eye, her body appeared before him unscathed. However, the presence of her power had become much weaker. Her face was sickly pale, and as she let out that shrill screech, a demented expression formed on her face. As she screeched, a large amount of five-colored fog spread from within her body. The five-colored fog in the air also started rapidly gathering towards her. At the same time, the tribe leader of Black Crane tribe in the distance shuddered and started withering away rapidly. In the blink of an eye, he turned into mere skin and bones, and once that happened, while he still had his eyes shut, he coughed out blood, then his head fell to the side and he breathed his last. Once he died, a gust of strangely alluring five-colored fog crawled out of his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, and started gathering rapidly towards Madame G in the distance. This is my final killing move. There's no way I won't be able to kill you with this. Madame G screeched with her shrill voice, and the five-colored fog around her started tumbling and surging. Then a bundle of it split apart from the rest, forming a five-colored peach blossom by the side, but it had not bloomed. It was just a bud. When that five-colored peach blossom appeared, a lascivious presence immediately spread out. 13 Peach Blossom Fiend. This is the result of Ji Yun Hai cursing me for 60 years. He originally wanted to use my body to refine that curse, and once I died, he would take it out, and it would have turned into a fiend. I have used my life to force out the Peach Blossom Fiend. There's no way you're not going to die now. As Madame G screamed, the fog around her swiftly dissipated to turn into another 12 five-colored peach blossom buds. Adding together with that one bud from before, they now numbered 13. Immediately after, an illusionary shadow appeared behind Madame G's body. It was a branch that looked like it came from a tree, and it was using her body as its core. At the same time that branch materialized, it connected with the 13 peach blossom buds and turned into a peach blossom branch with 13 flowers in midair. D. Madame G coughed out blood and an endless amount of bloody cracks appeared on her body. Those were the cracks that were left behind every single time her body had shattered over the years. At that moment, all of them appeared, making it seem as if her body was made up of patches. Fresh blood flowed out of those cracks, and it was clear that this 13 peach blossom fiend was her final killing move. The instant she opened her mouth, the 13 peach blossom buds on the peach blossom branch in midair bloomed swiftly. Once all of them had blossomed, they fell off the branch and charged towards Su Ming. Nine-headed dragon, Southern Emperor, absolute genocide. Su Ming's face was pale at that moment. A cold glare shone in his eyes, and he had also finished forming the hand seals. He pointed at Han Mountain Bell, and instantly, a strong bell chime was rang out. As that bell chime rang in the air, the shadow of the nine-headed dragon appeared grandly in the sky above Han Mountain Bell. 6 of the heads of the gigantic nine-headed dragon had awakened, and Su Ming's shadow was within their pupils. Once they let out a shocking roar, the 6 heads moved together, and with a presence that shook the sky and earth, they charged towards the 13 peach blossom fiend that was rushing towards Su Ming. The strong boom that followed could be heard even from White Bull tribe. The booming sound from Su Ming's side had also traveled to Black Crane tribe, causing terror to appear in all the tribe members of the 2 tribes, and all of them turned in the direction the sound had come from. When the 13 peach blossom fiend crashed into the nine-headed dragon amid that boom, they started dissipating one by one, and with each flower that disappeared, the cracks on Madame G's body would tear open wider. Blood covered her entire body. When there were only 4 of the 13 peach blossoms left, despair rose in Madame G's eyes. She let out a shrill screech, and with madness on her face, she exploded. She knew that she was definitely going to die, which was why she had decided to bring forward her own death to drag Su Ming into hell with her. The moment she chose to self-destruct and die, 3 of the 4 peach blossoms also crumbled. Their destruction caused the 5 colors on the final peach blossom to turn into one, which was pink, a shade of pink that was filled with an air of lust. That pink peach blossom shot through the nine-headed dragon's illusionary form, and when most of it had dissipated, it appeared before Su Ming, turning into a wisp of pink air that made his expression change. Just as he was about to escape into the stone's dimension, that pink air closed in on him and seeped into his nostrils. Su Ming twisted and was forced out of the stone's dimension. His face turned red instantly and struggle appeared in his eyes. Reason and lust started fighting viciously for control. Chapter 390, Outburst. It was quiet all around. Moonlight scattered on the ground, and if anyone looked at the air alone, they would feel that the moon was filled with a gentle color. However, if they cast their eyes on the ground, they would be terrified. There was a large amount of torn pieces of flesh there that were mixed with quite a large amount of blood. The wind was stirring up the bloody stench, causing it to stay around the area for a long time. Among one of the torn pieces of flesh was a red ring. It was flashing with a red light, and not too far away, in another spot littered with flesh and blood, was a pink bag, but the bag was also torn. There was a dried-up corpse on the land far away. That corpse belonged to the man from Black Crane tribe. He had died a horrible death and was practically left with only skin and bones. There was not a hint of flesh or blood remaining on him, and he looked like a dried-up twig. His original appearance could no longer be seen. His eyes were sunken and he looked like a skeleton. All his life force and essence had disappeared without a trace. A rotten stench spread from the lower half of his body, and it mixed with the bloody stench in the wind to turn into an indescribably terrible stench. Xiao Hong had gone missing. When Su Ming was fighting against Madame Ji, it had run off as if it had gone mad. Su Ming sat on the ground under the moonlight. He was trembling and had his eyes shut tightly. His cheeks were flushed pink, and a large amount of veins popped up on his skin. There was pain and struggle on his face. It had been very difficult for him to dodge Madame Ji's counter before she died, the final peach blossom fiend. Once its aura seeped into his ears, nose, ears, and mouth, a nigh uncontrollable urge and lust immediately rose within his body. That lust was madly attacking his reason, and once his lust won against everything, then he would be unable to control his own actions. Su Ming's head was a mess. All the women he had seen in his life flashed by, and their appearances came along with moans and seductive movements, causing his breathing to become increasingly faster. He had no idea how much time had passed by the time he opened his eyes. His eyes were bloodshot and he looked incredibly savage, especially since there seemed to be a ball of fire burning at the depths of his pupils. As that ball of fire burned, Su Ming lifted his head and let out a roar towards the sky. His roar reverberated in the air and spread in all directions. This isn't a simple aphrodisiac, it's a curse that brings out the most primal urges in the body. The struggle on Su Ming's expression became stronger. He could still keep his reason at the moment, albeit with great difficulty, and with whatever remained of his logic, he quickly analyzed that feeling in his body. It was not difficult for him to figure out that the so-called peach blossom fiend was the thing that was planted in Madame Ji's body by Ji Yun Hai in the past. That item had been continuously perfected, increasing in number, over the span of 60 years, causing it to be incredibly violent. All the images in my head are lewd and evil. If I let my lust control my body, then I will end up like Madame Ji. Even if I find a woman and succumb to my urges, I will definitely not be able to break the spell. And I have a feeling that once I'm unable to control myself and sink into my desires, it will last forever and will be extremely difficult for me to get out of, unless I use my own power and force down my urges. Su Ming lifted his right hand quickly, and with a red glare in his eyes, he quickly tapped a few spots in succession on his body, but it did no good. Even the black stone fragment hanging on his neck did not react. The black stone can allow me to not be bothered by external things, but now, there isn't any external factors causing a threat to me. It's that peach blossom fiend increasing my lust by several fold. If that is the case, then it's only natural that the black stone is useless. Su Ming trembled even more violently. His hair was no longer pure black, but gradually, at the roots of his hair, a fiery red shade could be seen. That red hue from the roots of his hair started spreading rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, half of Su Ming's hair had turned into a brilliant shade of red. At the same time, the pink hue on his face sank down, causing his face to return to that pale shade. However, the pink hue that had gone away had now gathered at Su Ming's chest. The veins that had popped up on his face looked as if they were about to explode. At the center of his brows, The mark of the sword flashed and the small virescent sword was forced out. It started flying around him while whistling in the air, as if it was very anxious. Su Ming lifted his hands and brought them down to seize the earth by his sides, plunging his hands deep into the ground. As the mark of the sword disappeared from the center of his brows, gradually, the mark of a peach blossom appeared. At the same time, most of his hair turned red as well. His appearance had changed so drastically that, compared to his calm self from before, he looked like a completely different person. A large amount of sweat broke out on his body. The appearance of that sweat caused an indescribable scent to start spreading from Su Ming's body, and if any woman smelled it, their minds would immediately turn into a mess and they would be unable to control themselves. Su Ming's expression became increasingly pained. He had practically used all his strength to fix his hands to the ground, but the power of that peach blossom fiend was too strong. After persevering for a long while, when the mark of the peach blossom completely formed, his hair turned completely red, and at that moment, Su Ming could no longer suppress his lust. He lifted his head and let out the strongest roar ever since he came to the land of the shamans. Roar! As he roared, Su Ming flew into the sky with red eyes. There was no longer any hint of reason in his eyes, only that urge caused by the most primal desire within him. Once he flew up, Su Ming charged in the direction before him without any hint of hesitation, the north. He was so fast that he turned into a long arc in midair and disappeared in the blink of an eye, not even retrieving Han Mountain Bell, that red ring, or the other objects. He simply charged forward like that, and in a short moment, he crossed the distance of 10,000 lees. As he charged forward, Su Ming continued growling. Those growls echoed in the air as he moved forth, and sounded like something from a wild beast, instilling fear among all those who heard it. It was midnight. Most of the tribe members in White Bull Tribe, which was located to the north, was asleep. Almost all who were awake were members of the tribe patrolling around the area, and the only other one who was not asleep and not a patroller was the patriarch of White Bull Tribe. That monkey-faced old man was sitting up straight in his house and holding a small plate of round peas the size of a fingernail in his hand. Occasionally, he would eat one of them while looking very content. However, just as he narrowed his eyes and picked up another pea to chew down on it once he brought it to his mouth, an earth-shaking howl suddenly reached his ears. The appearance of that voice stunned the old man. Once he opened his eyes, his expression suddenly changed drastically. He did not care about the plate of peas scattering on the floor and quickly rushed out of his house. When he lifted his head to look at the sky, his pupils shrank and shock appeared in his eyes. A long arc charged through the sky and closed in the blink of an eye, turning into Su Ming. His long red hair, crazed eyes, and the strong growls were enough to let anyone tell with just one glance that there was something wrong with him. That monkey-faced old man's heart trembled and he immediately let out a piercing howl. That howl instantly woke up the slumbering tribe, and all the tribe members walked out of their houses in shock. At the instant the men and women saw Su Ming in midair, he also saw them. Struggle appeared once again in Su Ming's eyes, causing his growls to become increasingly stronger. The monkey-faced old man immediately flew up and stared at him as if he was facing off a powerful enemy. All the warriors from all over the tribe stared up as well. The moment the old man gave his command, they would attack without care for their own safety to protect their own tribe. That monkey-faced old man was groaning in his heart at that moment. He clearly saw that Su Ming was in a near state of madness. While he had no idea what made him this way, it was still clear that he no longer had any shred of reason left in him. Once a person like this went into a state of frenzy, then the damage that would be brought to their tribe would be incredibly great. When the women in the tribe walked out of their houses and looked towards the sky in fear, the old man clearly saw Su Ming trembling, and the struggles on his face made him seem as if he was about to break down. Go back! The old man let out a low shout, and the normal tribe members that walked out of the houses quickly retreated while shivering. However, the moment those women started moving back, their bodies suddenly jolted and a red flush appeared on their faces. With a dazed look in their eyes, they looked towards Su Ming in the sky as if they had lost their senses. This change immediately attracted all the attention and shock from the rest of the people in the tribe. Some of the warriors even let out angry howls and were just about to attack Su Ming, but the instant they were about to launch their attacks, they were immediately held back by the patriarch. The old man stared at Su Ming. He could already tell from Su Ming's current condition that if they launched the preemptive strike and he counterattacked, then he would definitely flip out. At that moment, it would mean disaster to the entire White Bull tribe. More importantly, the old man could clearly sense a strong sense of danger coming from Su Ming's body. That threat made his heart tremble. He had a vague feeling that this Su Ming was even more terrifying than when he had met him previously. This was simply a feeling. He had no evidence to back it up. He could not tell much with his level of cultivation. He could only vaguely feel that the strong sense of danger came from within Su Ming's body, as if there was a terrifying power that was enough to make him shiver contained inside him. It was as if that existence was slowly waking up. It's aphrodisiac. The old man saw the strangeness on the women in the fear amidst his own fear. Once he linked it to that faint feeling, that terror in his heart, he gritted his teeth and made a decision that would anger all his tribe members, but they would not dare resist. In fact, that decision could even threaten his own position. Even he himself found it hard to voice it out, but he had a strong feeling that once Su Ming went mad, then what awaited their tribe was complete annihilation. It was especially so since he just sensed that power that terrified him once again from within Su Ming's body. The signs that the power was waking up grew increasingly clearer. In fact, most of the other tribe members had also sensed it, and their hearts shivered. Xia La, Ahua, Xiao Yun, the three of you, fly up. Once the old man gritted his teeth and said those words, the only 3 women in the tribe who practiced the ways of the shamans flew up with glazed eyes and walked towards Su Ming, who was still struggling in midair.